I can remember punishing myself for the way that I treated my daughter, really the way I treated everybody. But when there was a behavior that I did not like, I would get so angry more internally than I did externally. I didn't really do a whole lot of like yelling or anything. But when I got to a point that I was done and I was angry, I would blow up. I would lose my mind. And I thought that the harder I was on myself, the more critical I was, the more that I could hurt myself mentally, that would stop the behavior. But the craziest part is that is what was keeping me stuck. That is what was keeping me stuck in this terrible cycle of guilt and shame, which I talked about earlier in this live, is just like, yeah, just keeping myself in this icky state of just about myself. And the more I felt icky about myself, the more I would do those things because my brain was trying to find facts that I was that way. Back in the video where I talked about shame, it's like what I was doing was hanging on to this belief that I am angry, right? I am an angry parent. And that is just a limiting belief. And so when I was able to shift from I am an angry parent to I am a peaceful parent, I am a calm parent, that didn't just make me a calm parent, that is what helped me to move into the baby steps, which I share a lot more about in that video. But I thought that if I was hard on myself, if I could critique myself, that I would change my behavior for good. And I wish that somebody had told me that this was only causing me to be a worse parent, that it wasn't actually helpful. And I learned this, by the way, from how I was parented. And so when I had this realization when I was in school of like, you are only treating yourself that way because that was the way you were taught that change happened within yourself. It was like, I can't treat my daughter this way. I can't be explosive. I can't be angry. I can't. And then I started realizing and having all these realizations that I needed to make true change. And true change meant that I needed to get curious about my triggers. I needed to gain awareness and understanding of what was going on for me deep within, where this was coming from, learning to have that self-compassion, which I talked about in the mom guilt video. And so, yeah, really coming to this place of saying, yeah, like this is not working for me. The critiquing myself and being so hard on myself was only holding me back from being the parent that I knew that I really, really, really wanted to be and that I could be. And I'm really proud to say that like all this time later, I am the parent that I wanted to be. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. I mean, I messed up yesterday big time, but I'm not still punishing myself today for that. It's a brand new day. It's a fresh start. And I have no fears around, am I ruining my children? Because I'm not. I'm doing the very best I can. I'm showing up again and again and again. And that's what our children need. And they really want from us is just this consistency of showing up and not showing up perfectly, by the way, just showing up. The first thing that I did to stop being so hard on myself was doing inner work. And this was where I created this coherent narrative of what happened to me as a child. I mentioned earlier that I talked about these patterns and like my parents were very good parents and they meant well by everything that they did. And I know that, but that doesn't mean that they did everything perfect or they did everything well. And I think that's what the key here is to remember is that, our parents, they weren't bad. I'm in them that they do want good. They do want good for their kids. Most parents want their kids to have the best abilities and the best life. That's what they're really grooming them for. But at times they can get stuck in how they were parented and it's just a cycle. And so I needed to understand what happened, why it happened. And I had to get curious within myself, like, Why do I get so triggered? Why do I feel angry? Why is this happening? And when I was able to understand really the story and put it all together, that self-compassion piece came in. And I also really didn't feel the need to cling on to all that negativity that was constantly just swirling in my mind, really, where the subconscious level of things were happening. I wasn't needing to tell myself that I was an angry mom or that I was a terrible parent because it no longer felt useful, because I understood why. Why was I being this way? Why was I having this belief? It made a lot more sense. The second thing I did was I made sense of how I was parented. And this is part of that coherent narrative. But I think what's key here is that I actually dug into like the way my parents parented. And for any child, they need to understand where their parents came from, why they did what they did. And that kind of bigger picture piece really helps us to have compassion for our parents and for ourselves. It helps us to say, okay, this wasn't just done because I was a bad kid or because I was angry or because I, I was mean to people. Like, this happened because of the way my family was raised, because of the way, my mom was treated, and she did better than, was taught to her. But it's time for me to really break that cycle, right? It's my turn to take these things that our parents did that was not useful, and we need to break those. And so making sense of how I was parented was so freeing and helping me to, free that critical thinking of myself. The third thing I did was I began prioritizing nervous system regulation. Nervous system regulation is, I think, the top thing for parents. I think that I could just talk about nervous system regulation all day, every day. And I don't even think I would be able to give you all the tools and resources, because I don't even know it all. It is so complex, and there's so much that goes on within it. And so, yeah, I think that if you're like, okay, where do I start with nervous system regulation? I do have a podcast episode where I talk about emotional regulation, but you can start with things like somatics, doing things like singing. You can do things like giving yourself this butterfly hug. This always feels good. Doing things like this, finding calm down tools, which is exactly what these things are. Figuring out how to keep your body calm and start kind of training it to stay out of that fight and flight and stay into that calm zone when necessary, right? Most of the time we don't need to be in fight or flight, but we are stuck in fight and flight because that is all we know. That is how we feel like we need to survive. And we need to figure out, is that useful? Is that really helping us to become the parent that we, need to be? And the answer is no. We learn the best. We are able to function the best when we are in that really calm state. And so it's important that we start really exercising our body and our systems to get comfortable there. And it's not something, again, that happens overnight. It's something that is really that gradual building block. And you get to start doing that today. You can start right now. And that's the cool part about nervous system regulation. So the last thing that I'm going to say here is just that once I began doing these three things, I started to see these glimmers of hope. And that was where I really attached to the phrases like, I am a peaceful parent, or I'm a calm parent. And I really tried my best to allow my brain to start looking for the signs that was true. And the more that I started looking for those signs, the more hope I found, and the more I wanted to look for those. And honestly, the more I believed that there was hope for myself and that I could free myself from just, the way that I was talking to myself. I feel like I was finally able to say, this is not useful for me. This is not helping me. And I get to let go. and I get to be free.